Everyone, my name is Yuka Taniguchi. I will start my presentation. My topic is 3 lifestyles make your happy life. First, most of people hope to have a happy life. Japan has security, safe, and various foods. Many Japanese have home, friends, and useful goods. Japan seems a good country, but are they happy? My answer is no. The reason why is these two graphs. These graphs are about the number of people who commit suicide and suffer depression. Both of them are increasing, and new mental disorders recovering with an advance of psychology in recent years. In Japan, there are many people who do not have healthy mental. Then, how about you? When you asked, are you happy? Can you answer yes immediately? You will think about your private life and work, then you will say so. However, how do we get a happy life? This time, I introduce Mr. Martin Seligman, who is a famous psychologist and a pioneer of positive psychology. He suggests 3 lifestyles. Let's watch his presentation on TED.
We better give you a real soundbite. This time you can have 3. Professor Seligman, what is the state of psychology today? Not good enough. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. I want to say why psychology was good, why it was not good, and how it may become, in the next 10 years, good enough. And by parallel summary, I want to say the same thing about technology, about entertainment and design, because I think the issues are very similar. So why was psychology good? Well, for more than 60 years, psychology worked within the disease model. 10 years ago when I was on an airplane, I introduced myself to my seatmate and told them what I did. They'd move away from me. And because quite rightly, they were saying psychology is about finding what's wrong with you, spot ballooning. And now when I tell people what I do, they move toward me. And what was good about psychology, about the $30 billion investment NIMH made, about working in the disease model, about what you mean by psychology, is that 60 years ago, none of the disorders were treatable. It was entirely smoke and mirrors. And now 14 of the disorders are treatable, 2 of them actually curable. And the other thing that happened is that a science developed, a science of mental illness, that we found out that we could take fuzzy concepts like depression, alcoholism, and measure them with rigor, that we could create a classification of the mental illnesses, that we could understand the causality of the mental illnesses. We could look across time at the same people, for example, who are genetically vulnerable to schizophrenia, and ask what the contribution of mothering, of genetics are, and we could isolate third variables by doing experiments on the mental illnesses. And best of all, we were able in the last 50 years to invent drug treatments and psychological treatments, and then we were able to test them rigorously in random assignment, placebo-controlled designs, throw out the things that didn't work, keep the things that actively did. And the conclusion of that is that psychology and psychiatry of the last 60 years can actually claim that we can make miserable people less miserable. And I think that's terrific, and I'm proud of it. But what was not good, the consequences of that, were 3 things. The first was moral, that psychologists and psychiatrists became victimologists, pathologizers, that our view of human nature was that if you were in trouble, bricks fell on you. And we forgot that people made choices and decisions. We forgot responsibility. That was the first cost. The second cost was that we forgot about you people. We forgot about improving normal lives. We forgot about a mission to make was to develop interventions to make people happier, positive interventions. So that was not good. And so that's what led people like Nancy Edkoff, Dan Gilbert, Mike Csikszentmihalyi, myself to work in something I call positive psychology, which has three aims. The first is that psychology should be just as concerned with human strength as it is with weakness. It should be just as concerned with building strength as with repairing damage. It should be interested in the best things in life, and it should be just as concerned with making the lives of normal people fulfilling and with genius, with nurturing high talent. So, in the last 10 years, and the hope for the future, we've seen the beginnings of a science of positive psychology, a science of what makes life worth living. It turns out that we can measure different forms of happiness, and any of you for free can go to that website and take the entire panoply of tests of happiness. You can ask, how do you stack up for positive emotion, for meaning, for flow, against literally tens of thousands of other people. We created the opposite of the diagnostic manual of the insanities, a classification of the strengths and virtues that looks at the sex ratio, how they're defined, how to diagnose them, what builds them and what gets in their way. We found that we could discover the causation of the positive states, the relationship between left hemispheric activity and right hemispheric activity as a cause of happiness. I spent my life working on extremely miserable people, and I've asked the question, how do extremely miserable people differ from the rest of you? And starting about 6 years ago, we asked about extremely happy people, and how do they differ from the rest of us? And it turns out there's one way, very surprising, they're not more religious, they're not in better shape, they don't have more money, they're not better looking, they don't have more good events and fewer bad events. The one way in which they differ, they're extremely social. They don't sit in seminars on Saturday morning. They don't spend time alone. Each of them is in a romantic relationship, and each has a rich repertoire of friends. But watch out here. This is merely correlational data, not causal, and it's about happiness in the first Hollywood sense I'm going to talk about. Happiness of ebullience and giggling and good cheer. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not nearly enough in just a moment. We found we could begin to look at interventions over the centuries, from the Buddha to Tony Robbins. About 120 interventions have been proposed that allegedly make people happy. And we find that we've been able to manualize many of them, and we actually carry out random assignment efficacy and effectiveness studies. That's which ones actually make people lastingly happier. In a couple of minutes I'll tell you about some of those results. But the upshot of this is that the mission I want psychology to have, in addition to its mission of curing the mentally ill, in addition to its mission of making miserable people less miserable, is, can psychology actually make people happier? And to ask that question, happy is not a word I use very much. We've had to break it down into what I think is askable about happy. And I believe there are three different, and I call them different because different interventions build them. It's possible to have one rather than the other. Three different happy lives. The first
How was it? He talked about the traditional psychology in his presentation. Now I compare traditional psychology and positive psychology. Traditional psychology focuses on mental disorders and its recovery. It plays an important part in the modern society in which people who are suffering from mental disorders are increasing. But it does not focus on happiness for the general public. However, positive psychology focuses on developing strengths and ability and feeling happy. Its subject is happiness of the general public. Moreover, positive psychology prevents mental disorders. Then, what are three lifestyles said by Mr. Seligman? First is the present life. The present life is a lifestyle to do the best for a lot of present. It has already known that the present gives ephemeral happiness. And positive psychology says that we can have a longer happy time when we act for others than we act for ourselves. But the present has a wrong point. It means that 50% of positive emotion has hereditary and human has adaptability. Look at these pictures. Two boys are hungry. Sam makes dinner for them. A boy is very glad, but another boy is not so glad. Like this, when some people have the same experiment, the glad scale is different from each person. In other case, a boy is very hungry. His mother takes a cake for him. His first bite is very delicious, but when he gets close to food, he cannot be impressed so much. Then I talk about my idea. I focus on the duration of happiness, and we should have the servant attitude. For example, act for others are to do housework for the family and to prepare and to make a good environment at school and office. Also, fundraising and volunteer activities are good. These activities are not necessarily given thanks and evaluation, but we are proud of own activities. The second is the life of engagement. This lifestyle means that we do not have negative emotion, fatigue, and hungry by devoting. During the act, we do not feel happy, but when we finish the work, we get the satisfaction. Look at this picture. You have a lot of homework. You concentrate on it. You finish it and get the satisfaction. Then you will notice that the time goes so fast. In my idea, in the modern society, there are too many communication phrases and people must have a lot of relationships. In such society, people would often feel stress in relationships. Also, amount of work increases and its quality is required at a certain level with a lot of useful goods. People have the negative emotions easily when people cannot give unexpected results. So we should find the hobby which we can immerse. The third is the mental, meaningful life. This lifestyle attaches importance to understand and develop own strengths. Also, the meaningful life has the greatest effect on life in three lifestyles. Seligman and his companion made a test for understanding own strengths for 10 years. People can understand own strengths by using this test. In my idea, we should understand own strengths. It is the start point in the meaningful life. Let's think about two patterns. A girl who understands her strengths thinks about it when she looking for a job. She likes books and she works in the bookstore. A girl seems to be enjoy her work. When she is in trouble, she can get over it with her ideas. However, a boy who does not understand his strengths thinks about money. He works in a factory, but he seems to be bored. 2 months later, he retires. Many young Japanese have such situation. However, You understand your strengths and do your best for an ideal job. When you start the job, your strength becomes your confidence and the power for overcoming some troubles. Also, its experience becomes your confidence. You should have the work worth doing. It can say that to understand own strengths is to give a guide for life. In my conclusion, I think that to manage time needs for accepting three lifestyles. To manage the time is often slighted, but it is so difficult. We are all equal before the time. You cannot change the speed of the time and the day has 24 hours even if you are a rich man. However, you have a chance to be happy if you can manage the time whether you are a rich man or not. Needless to say, we need time to act others and to spend for hobbies. Also, we must work for a living. We should do the necessary work and have the time for ourselves. If we have enough time, you can deal with any troubles on the job with inner reserves. Your mental burden is so different. Thank you for your listening.